Welcome to the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast. My name's Dan Claps, founder and CEO of Franchise Playbook, a franchisor platform where we create, own, and operate dynamic franchise brands in the mobile services space. And my life's goal is to help people just like you fire their boss and become a business owner.
And I'm Christian Dadulak, top franchise consultant and co-founder of Real Franchising, a leading franchise consulting firm. And together, we're on a mission to help people fire their boss, hire themselves, and live the American dream through franchise ownership. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast. Today, just a short episode, just me, your co-host Christian Dadulak. And today I wanted to talk about the importance of using franchise professionals as you're exploring franchise ownership options. Different experts that are important to have on your team at your disposal as part of your acquisition team, really, at the bottom line. A couple of those things, obviously a franchise advisor. Of course, I'm a huge proponent of that since I am a franchise advisor over a franchise sidekick. But also funding professionals, franchise attorneys, maybe franchise-specific tax experts, CPAs. All of these people that you're going to want to have on your team at your disposal to make sure that everything is buttoned up to the process and that you're just thinking through everything that you're going to need to make sure that you get set up properly. So first and foremost, franchise advisor. Why use a franchise advisor? Well, if you're working with a good one, someone that knows what they're doing, they're going to do a whole heck of a lot more than just simply introducing you to some franchises that might be worth taking a look at. You do not want a franchise advisor who is simply the franchise buffet, who is just going to pitch you some franchise options, introduce you to them, and then say, hey, good luck, see you never, right? We don't want that. We want someone that's going to coach us through the process, that is going to make sure that we're thinking through everything that we need to be thinking about. Someone that can connect you with the other resources that I'll mention in a moment, like funding professionals, like franchise attorneys, critical parts of the process. And so what you want is not a franchise broker, someone that's simply, like I said, going to be the franchise buffet and say, hey, here's some options you might want to check out. I'll make the introduction, and then hopefully you buy something and I get a referral fee from the franchisor at the end of the day. That's not what you want. You want a franchise advisor. And I know a lot of people will talk about franchise broker, franchise consultant, franchise advisor. It's all the same thing. And look, it is. The title isn't what matters at the end of the day. But I would say that it's not just a distinction without a difference. It does matter. It is important to have someone that's advising you. And there is a difference between a broker, someone who is trying to sell you a franchise. They're trying to get you over to some options, like I said, and hopefully you buy. An advisor is someone that's going to truly coach you through the process and making sure that no stone is left unturned, all of our I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and we're ready to move forward if and only if it truly is the right option for you. And so an advisor is, sure, they're going to matchmake. They're going to recommend some franchise options that fit your profile, your preferences, your passions, your goals financially, professionally, personally, your lifestyle goals, taking into consideration all of those things. What are the characteristics of a business that you're interested in? Do you like recurring revenue? If it's a lower ticket item, maybe it's $50 service or product. Or do you like the idea of maybe it's a one-time service, but the job size is $10,000 or $20,000, like a roofing project, for example. So one and done, but you get a nice payday. Those businesses can cash flow a little bit quicker. And there's really no right or wrong answer. And you have to take into consideration things like exit strategy. Recurring revenue businesses tend to trade at a higher multiple than a one and done type of service. So there's all kinds of different things that you need to be thinking about. And there's no one size fits all cookie cutter solution. And that's why it's important to talk to a franchise advisor, because they can recommend options that fit what you're looking for. They can show you different kinds of options, but they're not going to just recommend some options and then introduce you to them. They're going to meet with you on a weekly basis. Maybe they play devil's advocate a little bit, or they give you some things to think about. Oh, did you think about this? Did you ask about that? Okay, if you buy the rights to multiple territories, what does that do to the minimal marketing spend that you're required to do as per your franchise agreement? If you wanted to sell those territories someday, what franchise transfer fees are involved in that. What rights do you have if you wanted to do that? What does that process look like? Other things like, again, if you bought the rights to multiple territories, or multiple locations, what if you only develop one? What if you build out one and you're like, this is plenty for me, or I don't have the capital to really get these other ones open? Whatever the reason, do you have the rights to sell those territories? How does that work, right? And all just a ton of different stuff that you're going to want to ask in the process. And a franchise advisor is here to give you those questions. Even if you're a seasoned business professional, I work with a lot of current franchise owners, business owners that operate non-franchise businesses, investors. And so these are really savvy business people. They know what to look for in a business opportunity. My job is to help them to save time, eliminate headache as much as possible, and to make sure that they know some of the more franchise nuance type things to look out for. And so that's what a good franchise advisor is going to do. They're going to meet with you weekly. They're going to coach you. And they're not there to sway you in one way or the other. They're not here to tell you which opportunity to pick at the end of the day. But they're going to ask questions. They're going to coach. They're going to advise so that you can arrive at that decision on your own. They're going to make sure you stay on track. They're going to communicate feedback from the franchise directors, the people that work for the franchise directly, that are educating you about the opportunity. How are they feeling about you? Do they feel like you're a good candidate? What are some concerns that they have or red flags that they're seeing on their end that you should be aware of to make sure that you show better on your next meeting, to make sure that you get approved? Because it is an approval process. And every franchise will say that. It's an awarding process. It's an approval process. And for the good opportunities, especially if they're popular and in demand, that is absolutely true. Now, they still need to sell themselves on you and make sure that they're the right fit for you at the end of the day. But it is a two-way street. It's a tango. It takes two to tango. So you need to make sure that you're showing up well. And a good franchise advisor is going to let you know how you're showing up so that we can make adjustments. It happens all the time where someone will be maybe early in the process or even at confirmation day, discovery day, meet the team day, when you fly out, meet the founders, meet the leadership team, all of that. 100%, you can get denied at that point. If they don't feel like your personality is the right fit, if they don't feel like you're in it, if they don't feel like you have the bandwidth to operate this based on other priorities, maybe a current job, you're not thinking through everything, funding isn't squared away. If you don't have everything buttoned up, you can absolutely get denied. And that's why it's important to have a franchise advisor to make sure that everything is tracking, you get the right things in place at the right times through the process so that if and when you come to the decision, you come to the point that you're like, yeah, I do think this is the right opportunity. I would like to move forward with this. You are able to at that point. So that's what a franchise advisor is going to help you to do. Coach you through the process. Make sure that you're getting the information from the existing franchise owners when you speak to them. You're getting the right kinds of information. They're giving you questions that you should ask so that you can get all of the information and accurate information. And you're digging a little bit deeper. Hey, they said that they made $30,000 last year. And you're not super impressed by that. Like, hey, that's crazy. Like they said they had a net profit of $30,000. Okay, well, if you didn't ask a clarifying question, you'd think, man, that kind of sucks. I don't know if that's going to meet my financial goals. But then we have to ask them, okay, well, how long have you been operating? And also, well, have you paid yourself out of that? Did that include an owner's salary? Did that include write-offs that you took from the business? So a better question might be, what was your owner's benefit? So wrapping all of the compensation, all of the benefit to the owner in the business, and also relative to how much time they put in. If they're working the business super part-time, they don't have a ton of employees, a ton of overhead, a ton of risk, maybe it does make sense to get that kind of return. All of these things you got to think about, right? And just ask clarifying questions. And again, that's what a good franchise advisor is going to help you with throughout the process to make sure that you're thinking through those things. So that's a franchise advisor. So franchise advisor, very important, critical part of the process. And we want to make sure that we're working with somebody that has done this before. Someone that knows what to look out for, what questions to ask. They know what the franchise process looks like. They know the directors that work for these franchise opportunities. They have a relationship and they can go to bat for you at the end of the day to make sure that you get the territories you want. You're aware if there's any other competition, other people that are looking at possibly buying that business in your local market, so that we know how quickly we might need to move. All of that, okay? So that's franchise advisor. Second thing is you want to work with somebody that is a funding professional. Sure, if you have a local banker or something like that that you have a relationship with, knock yourself out. But if you're like most people, maybe you don't. Or even if you do have a local banker, I think it's a good idea to talk to somebody that is a specialist in putting together a funding strategy, a financing strategy for franchises specifically. So a couple of companies that come to mind are Fran Fund, Benetrends. They do a fantastic job. There's other companies like Guidant, First Financial, all great companies that specialize in franchising that can help you to understand what it's going to take to fund your business, what your different options are. So maybe it makes sense to get an SBA loan. Okay, there's pros and cons to that. Maybe it's a securities-backed line of credit where you put up your securities, your investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, in a non-qualified account. So these can't be retirement savings. And you put that up as collateral. The money stays invested. So stays invested, that doesn't change. And you get a line of credit using those investments as collateral to get a loan against. Typically, they have lower interest rates than an SBA loan. They fund a lot quicker. It's a lot less headache. Now, there's certain requirements. There's pros and cons, of course. And you can only get access to a certain percentage of those assets or get a line of credit for a certain percentage of those assets. But maybe that strategy makes sense. If you have a lot of home equity, maybe it makes sense to get a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, and use some of that to help fund the business. Maybe it's an equipment financing program, a leasing program. Maybe if there's a lot of vehicles involved, it's a fleet financing program. Maybe you just write a check for it so you don't have the debt service drag on the business, and so more money can flow to the bottom line. Or what if you're thinking about buying the rights to multiple locations? What does that look like? What are the timeframes, requirements? Do I need to put collateral down for this loan if it's an SBA loan? Do I need to sign a personal guarantee? Is it possible to maybe get some of those things waived or reduced or whatever the case is? And that's where working with a franchise funding professional can be very, very, very helpful. So they'll let you know what your options are. They'll walk you through the process, timelines, they'll hold your hand. Now, of course, there's fees involved in doing it, but you can't be a penny wise but a dollar foolish. Don't step over dollars to get to dimes. Making sure that things are set up the right way from a funding perspective is important. And some of those companies I mentioned, they're not lenders themselves. For example, Fran Fund. Let's say you talk to Fran Fund. They are going to shop you around at different banks to make sure that they can get you a competitive interest rate, to make sure that you can get the best terms on the loan. Oftentimes, they can get certain requirements that if you went to a bank directly, they're not going to waive. Maybe they can get that personal guarantee removed, or they can reduce collateral requirements, whatever the case. Now, it's going to be case by case, of course, but sometimes they can help get some of those things waived or limited, reduced. And so if you can do that and reduce your liability, it's like, yeah, maybe they're not going to get you a crazy reduced interest rate because it's going to be pretty much within the same realm of reality. But if they can reduce your liability and your risk, which ultimately is one of the most important parts of the process, is reducing your risk and your liability, maybe it makes sense to talk to them and have them help you out with that. And so that is huge. So they'll shop you around at different banks. They'll make sure that they can get you great rates, great terms with banks that are franchise friendly. Not every bank is created equal. Now, it's not an SBA loan because you're getting money from the SBA. Again, just talking about SBA loans here. These banks are lending based on SBA requirements. And so you're still working with banks, and different banks have different appetites for different things. Some really like franchising, maybe some don't. Maybe there's certain industries they specialize in. If you're thinking about a boutique fitness franchise, for example, maybe you go with a certain bank over another because they've done a lot of those types of deals and they're very comfortable with that kind of investment. Or maybe you're doing a home service franchise, like a restoration franchise or a tiny home franchise, or you're doing painting, whatever the case is. And maybe you want to work with banks that are familiar with those kind of loans and working with and funding those kinds of businesses. And they have an appetite for those businesses. So your approval is a lot easier and more likely to go through than if you went to a bank directly who may or may not have an appetite for that kind of business or franchising in general. So these are all things to keep in mind. And one of the reasons that, again, using a franchise funding professional can be very, very helpful and important, because they can get you access to a lot of these banks. And so you don't have to spend all the time and deal with all the headache of trying to find and identify these banks yourself. And then you have an advocate with you holding your hand through that process, structured. You know exactly what documents you need to fill out. You know what the process is. You know what the order of operations is. Okay, I got to do step one. I can't start with step three, then do step one. So you're doing it in a way that makes sense. It's methodical. That's why working with a funding professional is important. And again, they can explain what your different options are. Maybe you do an SBA plus a HELOC, or an SBA loan plus a securities-backed line of credit. You can blend these options in a way that might make sense for you. If you're doing a service-based brand, for example, did you know that you can, if you're buying the rights to multiple territories, did you know that all you have to do is pay the franchise fee for the first territory up front, and then you could have the rest come in. You could pay the franchise fees to buy the rights to the rest of those territories on deposit. And then when that SBA loan comes through, you can use that money to pay those additional franchise fees. You can reimburse yourself. There's all types of different options. And so again, you're not really going to know a lot of that unless A, you talk to a franchise advisor, but really talk to a funding professional. I know enough to be dangerous as a franchise advisor, but that is not my realm. I want to make sure that people that are getting funding are doing it the right way and learning all the nuances about it, and just learning enough so that they know they can make an educated decision, and then have a company like a Fran Fund or a Benetrends or a Guidance or a First Financial guiding them through that actual process. Okay. So that's the importance of using a funding professional. Next is a franchise attorney. So this is someone that, again, going to make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. Many of them are going to offer some kind of free consultation initially, just to let you know what it might look like. Usually it's a flat fee. So it's a one-time fee. You don't need to have them on retainer. So they'll do FDD review. So they'll look through the entire FDD with you. They're going to let you know what is in the franchise agreement. And yes, if you're thinking, gosh, why do I need a franchise attorney? They're not going to negotiate on anything. I know that I'm not going to get reduced royalties. I'm not going to be able to whittle down and negotiate on the franchise fee. It's going to be what it is at the end of the day. And that's true. Most franchises, especially the great ones with a lot of interest, demand, they're popular, they're not going to negotiate with you on a ton of stuff. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to know what's in the franchise agreement and what it says. Sure, you can read through it, but you want to make sure that you're really thinking through what the implications are. If you sign that document, you are going to be held to that document. And so you need to make sure that you don't understand just what it's saying, but what are the implications? If your business, like let's imagine we're 5 years down the road, you've been operating this business for 5 years. What does that look like? If I want to sell my business, what are the things that I need to pay attention to there? How can that affect my ability to sell, get the maximize my multiple? If I want to renew my franchise agreement after 10 years, the average franchise agreement is around 10 years, and things are going well, and you want to keep rocking and rolling. What does that look like? What are fees that I need to pay? Things that I need to be aware of? Liabilities I might open myself up to? Whatever the case is. And I'm not saying that there are, but questions you need to ask. So all of these things is what a franchise attorney will break down for you to help you to understand what it is you're really signing up for at the end of the day, so that you're going in eyes wide open. Because the worst thing that can happen is you move forward with a franchise and the reality of what it is to operate that business, or what you're expected to do, doesn't match up with what you were told in the process, and there's a disconnect, and then you're not happy, you're upset, and it's just a nightmare, right? That's a situation we don't want to be in. So invest the time, invest the money up front through the due diligence process to make sure that we're set up, to make sure that we're good to go, so that if you do find the right fit, you're ready to pull the trigger and you can feel good and have the peace of mind knowing you're good to go. So that's the importance of using a franchise attorney. And one thing I'll say, might I add, is sometimes there are some stuff you can negotiate on. Now, don't come in with a laundry list of 100 different things that you want changed in the agreement. Most franchises are going to say, no, absolutely not. But if you come back with 3 to 5 key things that you want changed, maybe it's terminology, or maybe it's certain liabilities that you want reduced, you can ask for some of those things. And some franchises, many will work with you on a couple of things if you're reasonable and you come to the table with recommendations made by a franchise attorney and you do this beforehand in good faith and you're willing to work with them. Sometimes you can negotiate some of those things. And franchises will be willing to work with you and be flexible on some of those key items. Doesn't hurt to ask. Maybe they say no, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Okay. And that's why if you're using some other attorney, a divorce attorney or a general business attorney, someone that hasn't spent the time looking at these franchise agreements, they're not going to know what to look for. They're not going to know what questions to ask. Oftentimes, they might blow up the deal and ruin your opportunity to buy a franchise because they're going to come back with a million things they want changed from the agreement. They're redlining everything. And the franchisor is going to say, no, okay, you're clearly not serious. I don't know if this is going to work out. And maybe they move on to somebody else. That happens. So don't use your brother's, cousin's, uncle's, best friend's dog who has a law license, who practices some other kind of law, to get your FDD and franchise agreement reviewed. You want to use someone that's a professional, that knows franchising, that specializes in franchising, that does this all day long. They know exactly what to look for, like clockwork. And more than likely, the brand you're looking at, they've analyzed this FDD before. They've looked at it before. They know what to look out for. They know what some of the key things are. Maybe they know what the franchise is willing to budge on because they've done it. They've worked with that brand before. And frankly, a franchise advisor in many cases will know what some of those things are as well. So that's why it's important to work with a good franchise advisor who knows what they're doing. But use a franchise attorney. Because oftentimes you look at these FDDs, you look at the agreements, it's written one-sided. And most attorneys will think, man, why would anyone sign this, right? And you don't want that to scare you off from what could otherwise be an amazing opportunity, because this person who doesn't know franchising looks at the document and thinks, man, this is pretty scary. Don't do it. Franchising is written very one-sided in favor of the franchisor. That's just how it is. But it's written like that to protect the brand. The franchisees that are doing what they're supposed to, the best franchisees, they like a strong franchise agreement, an airtight agreement, because it protects the brand. It protects their investment, their ability to expand. They don't have to worry about their neighbor franchisee doing something they're not supposed to, hurting them in their local market, and the franchisor has no ability to enforce that. So that's all normal, and you want that at the end of the day. But working with an attorney who isn't savvy about the franchise industry isn't going to understand that and might cause you to walk away from an opportunity that otherwise would be a fantastic fit. So that's the importance of using a franchise-specific attorney. And then the last thing is, maybe consider using a franchise-specific CPA, a tax expert. Now, candidly, I don't necessarily think this is completely necessary. Maybe you have your CPA already. They likely deal with a lot of other business owners. Maybe they have some other franchisees as clients. And a franchise business is, like most other businesses, a franchise, or it's a business, right? It's a business. So they're going to know more or less how to set things up, guide you, coach you. But it is important, I think. Sometimes some of my clients might want to consult with a franchise-specific CPA as they're talking through some funding options. Some CPAs may not like the ROB strategy, which I didn't touch on earlier, the rollover for business startups. Tap into 401ks, tax-free, penalty-free. There's requirements. You got to set it up as a C Corp and so forth. But you get your business started with no debt. It's a quicker funding process as well. And so there's requirements within the scope of this podcast. We're not going to get into all of it. That's where I talk to a franchise funding professional to get some of those details. But maybe you want to have a CPA that's thinking through it and looking at, because the franchise funding companies are not tax experts. So if you want to minimize your tax exposure, make sure you're doing things, setting it up the right way, given all the other investments and things you have going on, maybe it makes sense to talk through some of those things. People that are familiar with funding strategies that maybe a lot of other businesses don't traditionally use to fund. Again, like the rollover for business startup, the ROB strategy. And again, just making sure that everything is set up in the right way. Entity formation is done the right way. You're structuring your entity in a way that makes sense, again, given what your goals are, given what your tax situation is with other businesses or your personal tax situation. So all things that you're going to want to consider. And that's where franchise-specific CPA can be very, very helpful. So those are the key advisors that I recommend surrounding yourself with through the franchise buying process, but even after the fact. I think that you should check in with your franchise advisor once a year to know what opportunities are on the horizon, to be aware of what's going on in the marketplace. And then a funding professional, making sure that you understand what the landscape is so that you know how to continue to grow your business, what funding options might be available to you now that you have a business that's open and operating. A franchise attorney who can review agreements if you're looking to renew your franchise or buy additional franchises. These help to have in your corner. Same with a franchise-specific CPA. And there are other advisors that I'm sure that could be very, very important and critical to you as well. Many of them, the franchisor might provide directly, and vendors for payroll, insurance, those kinds of things. But it's good to know who those professionals are. And again, good franchise advisors are going to be able to connect you with a lot of those key professionals. So that's it. Franchise advisor, franchise funding expert, franchise attorney, franchise-specific CPA. Have these people as part of your acquisition team so that if you do find the right opportunity for you, you're ready to move on it. You have the peace of mind. Things are set up the right way. I's are dotted, T's are crossed. You're good to go. And if you want a connection to any of those professionals, you can absolutely reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn, Christian Dadulak, Dadulak. You can find me on Instagram at Deals with Dadulak. I'm on Twitter as well, Deals with Dadulak. So there's no H in the with. So Deals with Dadulak. And I'm more than happy to help you out. And you can also reach out to me at my email, cdadulak@franchisesidekick.com, and I can help you get connected with some resources that way as well. So if you'd like help with any of that, if you'd like help buying a franchise, identifying the right fit, please do not hesitate to reach out as well. And as always, appreciate you guys hopping on. Appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. If you got some value out of this, would really, really, really appreciate a review. If you could share it with someone you think this might be valuable for as well, post it on social media, let people know about it. We would really appreciate that. So again, thanks everyone for tuning into another episode of the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast, and we will see you on another episode.
You're f***ing fired. If you want to say those words to your boss, make sure you head on over to ifiredmybosspodcast.com and fill out the form to schedule a no-cost consultation. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who might also want to fire their boss.